Iowa's News Now Sports brings you black and gold glory. Your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
You like it when the crowd does the coop thing?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think when they started doing it last year, I think some of my family members thought they were booing. But no, it's pretty cool.
And that's how we started calling it the Coop thing. Welcome to Eye on the Hawks, our live Sunday edition post-Michigan State, a 26-16 Hawkeye win with a lot to unpack, certainly. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here. We'll get to Coop's big night, both on defense and special teams here in a little bit, but of course the top story really out of Iowa's win is what they lost, which is a starting quarterback. Cade McNamara goes down with his left knee injury. I guess that's what we're assuming it is. We still have to find out for sure. We'll probably learn more Tuesday, but certainly did not look good. As we get into the highlights, starting with that low light there in the first quarter, as Cade was starting to drive, the defense or the offense got pinned way back. Well, I guess we'll start with that shot there. Oh, and you overheard him say to Rucker there from Michigan State that he messed up his knee, and you see the wrap there. Yeah. Heavy afterwards, just a super, super tough stretch for him to not only come into Iowa trying to recover from one knee surgery, then he hurts the quad at Kids Day, and then gets taken off like that. Just a super tough situation, and your heart goes out to him. Just has stepped in and been a leader right away, but not an easy spot.
Yeah, our colleague from KCCI, Shannon Earhart, had about the best angle of that I've seen so far. She was just right behind the end zone where it happened, and you just saw that knee kind of buckle behind him. Non-contact, I think you could see nobody really touched him, just kind of crumpled right under him. So hard to say what happened. I think, yeah, across the board, players, coaches, fans, media, I mean, everybody really liked Cade a lot, if not even just as a player. Just seemed like a good kid with a good head on his shoulders, and nobody wanted to see something like that happen. He was such a talented kid. Everybody was so excited about what he brought to the table, and tough to see him because he's going to be out for a while.
Yeah, we've got full game highlights that start with the injury itself. I had a halfway decent look at it. You see him running out of the end zone here and just takes that left step and out of kind of the column of the body, so to speak, and then goes down. And you knew right away it wasn't good. But Iowa pressed on and at least found something to be happy about. There's the first highlight from Cooper DeJean of the day, a big pick to stop a potential MSU scoring drive. We saw MSU move this ball, and then Deacon Hill comes in, and Eric All just keeps on moving. A huge push for him to get that touchdown to put Iowa up. I believe 10-6 at the time. You see Rusty Fethin there stepped into the starting lineup, and then Jonathan Kim, kicker for MSU, 58 yards as time expired in the first half. That's a new Kinnick Stadium record, breaking Marshall Kane's old mark, 57 against Pitt in 2015. And then one of the low points for Deacon Hill's day. We'll get more into his performance in a little bit with the pick by MSU. But then here's the play that everybody's talking about, where they were chanting Coop even before the ball was snapped, and you felt like it just kind of got willed into existence. Cooper DeJean down the sideline, without a doubt.
He'd been so itchy to make that thing happen. You could just see it on his other punt returns earlier in the season, like just wanting to finally break something open. So last night was the time he did it. And
then the defense, what a night for them. 4 turnovers. That's the third of them. Ethan Herkett recovering the fumble there. Quinn Schulte might have forced that fumble. I think it was officially ruled to Nick Jackson, but hey, the Xavier fans feeling good. And Deacon Hill, as far as we know, QB1 moving ahead. So let's get to reaction from Kirk and company.
Just 1 second. I got to pull this real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
We can wait.
Impressed how Deacon stepped in. Tough circumstance and disappointing, mostly for Cade. To go down early with an injury like that, we really don't know his status till early next week, but it's nonetheless very disappointing. I can only imagine how he's feeling. Yeah, I don't want to speculate, but it always is concerning. The guy has to get helped off the field, and just that if just to miss time period right now through what considering what he's been through, it's really tough. So you feel bad for any player who gets injured, but in his case, it's rough.
It was kind of strange because, for as long as I've been playing in college, Cade's been the one that's thrown the ball to me, except for 1 year with Joe Milton. It was a half a season, but Cade ended up coming in during that season. But it was kind of weird at first, just looking back for the ball and seeing Deke throw me the ball. But you know, it's the ball. Ball's a ball. You know, if it comes right here, you're gonna catch it no matter who's throwing it. So that's it. Or sometimes you catch it right here. You know?
Ball's the ball with the shirt, Ray Gun. Yeah, we already kind of went over it. Just losing Cade's so tough considering what he's been through over the last calendar year and change, doing the one knee, getting surgery, having to sit out, transferring here, coming in with such hoopla, and then recovering during the spring. Didn't really get to see him until getting into August. Gets hurt again in front of the Kids Day crowd, and now. Boy, you don't know what's going to happen. Again, we'll learn more Tuesday. But now the other leg, and it's about as tough as a situation as you can get for a kid who's already been through quite a bit, like I said, in the last year.
Yeah, hard to see. I mean, I don't know, Mike. Anything else you want to add to that? I kind of weighed in already.
No, it's just definitely a bummer for Cade, and we've been talking like after the game, before the podcast, how Cade was. I don't want to say they went all in with Cade with the NIL deal, but you got to think, at least in my opinion, that the expectations for the season are different as a fan. Now, the team is going to still try and win the West, and they're all winnable games still.
Yeah.
With DeJean back there, I think it's going to be tougher. What we saw from DeJean and what we saw from Cade this season, I mean, so far, it's not that far off. I think, Mitch, you were saying that too, and I was rewatching the first half earlier today. But it's still looking forward. It's going to be tough with a young, experienced quarterback who didn't play last year at Wisconsin, played 3 games, he said, his senior year because of COVID, and hasn't played a lot of live game action. So, that pick that he threw, I hope he gets that out of his system, but hasn't played a lot, especially at the college level,
Yeah, I think to add one more thing to the Cade thing is that just as in terms of being such a spiritual and emotional leader of that team. I mean, again, coming in 6 months into the program, you're named one of the team captains, something that we haven't seen out of a quarterback in a few years, and so losing that on-field leadership is a big thing. But Deacon Hill, I mean, I don't know. He's obviously younger than Cade, so he probably doesn't have quite that level of leadership experience yet. But he seems like a guy that the kids can rally around and support. And to your point, I don't think that I saw a huge level of difference in talent and production between Cade McNamara and Deacon Hill, at least out of the small sample size.
Very mature too. I really liked in the post game when he said. The first thing I said to the guys in the huddle was, I'm going to lean on you. Mm-hmm. Like, he just knows. I think that's just very mature of him, as a young guy, just knowing, like, hey, you guys are going to be my rock, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of Deacon's day. 11 of 27 for 115, touchdown and a pick. He's the guy, as far as we can tell, moving forward. Kirk said if Cade's out for any significant length, which I think the expectation is that he will be, he is your QB1, a far cry from a guy who I think was characterized in one thing I wrote, or one thing I read that had been written last night, that he was a bit of an afterthought transfer signing, which I didn't really frame it like that. Anytime a guy who's a former four-star coming in from a Big Ten program, I think your eyebrow raises a little bit of like, okay, like here's this guy, and his connection with John Budmeyer, who I believe was maybe his primary recruiter to Wisconsin. But ups and downs there, drops, the big story coming out of last night. I think anywhere between 5 and 6 drops. A lot of targets to wide receivers too, but we kind of just talked about this. Didn't seem to do anything to make you think the sky is totally falling. And considering he hasn't played a whole lot of football, but he's got a ton of time with the ones in the spring and basically half of fall camp while Cade was out with the quad. Again, from what we've seen from Cade in 2023 compared to this small sample size, there wasn't a massive drop-off in terms of, I'm not going to compare talents because they're 2 different players, but in terms of production that we've seen, didn't see anything to make you think, well, every goal set for 2023 is out the door. Yeah. There's a long, long road ahead, and it's a road that Deacon Hill is probably going to be walking now for us.
Yeah, as we've kind of talked about, as much as there was a lot of excitement about Cade coming in, his on-field production was not outstanding. His numbers were not setting the world on fire. He was doing a good job managing the game for the most part. Rough game last week against Penn State, so he'd been good, above average, but not great. And Deacon Hill, I think it's kind of about the same thing that we saw out of him. 11 for 27 yesterday. He very easily, without a number of very easy drops, could have been about 17 for 27, maybe gotten up to 200 yards passing. I mean, the drops yesterday were outrageous. I mean, I think that there was maybe some commentary about the fact that, like, just receiving the ball from a new quarterback than who you're used to. I mean, maybe there was something to that just like a little bit different zip on the ball than what the wide receivers and the tight ends were used to. But boy, there were some drops.
First drop was when Cade was in. It was the first drive, and it was 3rd and 6, and Eric dropped one. It was 2nd and 6. It would have set up for a 3rd and 1, which is a lot more manageable than the 3rd and 6. They didn't convert and had to kick a field goal. And he alluded to that when he talked. I believe I read, or I think there are 5 drops from wide receivers, and then add the Eric all 1, and the 5 were when Deacon was in.
Yeah.
So I think Deontay had 3, Nico had 1, and Caleb Brown had 1 that would have been a big first down on 3rd and 9, right after the stick. So, yeah, I mean, his completion percentage was 41%, or 47%, I believe, or was it 41? Something around the 40s. Not great, but if you add those, a
lot of those
drops, I think it's closer to 50.
Yeah.
Maybe 55.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Deacon himself. QB1 moving ahead as far as we know.
It's very quick turn of events, but, we prep all week. Coach Bud and Brian, really state that even if you're not the starter, you have to prepare like the starter. So it's all about just doing my job. So when Cade went down, whether he's in or I'm in, we have to do our jobs to help this game. I mean, it was pretty surreal. I think everybody knows that, especially a night game at Kinnick, and it's what dreams are made of. So, I mean, it was surreal. It was a lifetime experience that I'll never forget. But especially the best part was being with my team, us pulling it through and winning.
Can you express your emotions of that first touchdown pass you had to Eric? Did you let out a chew at the end of that?
I did, yeah. It was, like I said, surreal, very hyped up. It was a great drive we put together all around. Couldn't have done it without Eric, couldn't have done it without the O-line. And so I think we're all virtually the same amount of hyped, I should say.
Should also point out not just Cade getting hurt in this one, Nick DeJean, who is the most versatile offensive lineman Iowa has, also went out for an injury. It looked bad. It was on the QB sneak. Looked not great, but Kirk said afterwards, not as bad as it may have appeared. So again, won't speculate, but that's a tough loss that you add on now with losing QB1, RBs 1 and 2, tight end 1, and again, your most versatile O-line member. So the hits keep coming. You see the stats there. We just went over with Deacon as well. Maybe it's the fact that he's a big fella and he's got a big arm. I can't help but start comparing in my head Deacon Hill to Nate Stanley, who I think any Hawkeye fan would be more than appreciative of having a sequel to the Nate Stanley story, a 3-year starter that has a career that ends with him basically behind Chuck Long in almost every single major passing category in the program's history. So again, super small sample size. I can't help but, even if not totally encouraged, I saw enough that your eyebrows raised a little bit and it seemed good, but didn't. I saw some posts out there well, season's essentially over. Again, the lack of patience sometimes in fan bases is astounding.
Yeah.
Man, this is your dude, so
yeah, and
hitch the wagon to it because that's the way it's going to go. And if you want to win the West, it's probably going to be through number 10, who's going to have to head back to his old home in a couple weeks.
It's true. As you have pointed out, among other people, I mean, this guy took probably the majority of snaps with the ones during the spring and the summer, all the time that Cade was injured. I mean, this guy has a lot of reps with the ones, and so it's not like this guy is just some scrub. This is not Alex Padilla coming in the second half. I mean, not to throw shade at Alex Padilla, but come on. This guy, he knows what he's doing out there, and he showed it last night that he can be a above average, serviceable quarterback at the Big Ten level and do some things for this team.
One kind of big bummer about the going back to Cade injury is just it seemed to me that they changed a little. They tweaked the offense when they came out. They come out right away when Cade's still in. Throw a real quick hitch to Deontay, ran like an out, got 20 yards. Next play, right to Reganey behind the line, he gets 10 yards. And they were doing these quick passing games, which I think a lot of people were like, why can't we implement that? Because, you see it all around college football. You do that, and then all of a sudden they're in, Michigan State territory. And it's like, I would have liked to see Cade maybe game 1, game 2, game 3, to see them do that a little more.
Yeah.
Target the receivers. Deontay, despite having 3 drops, he still had like 3 or 4 catches. I'd take the drops out of the equation, and he had a good game compared to like stats all season to receivers. So I'm kind of bummed that I don't get to see Cade with that offense, but hopefully they continue that with DeJean, which all indications what they did seems like they will.
Yeah, I would hope so. And especially last night, it's tough when you come in and you've been planning the whole week for Cade against that team, and now DeJean comes in, and it's like you a little bit just kind of have to rely on your safety valves when it comes to guys like Eric Ald. But with a week of game planning, I think that offense could look a little bit different moving ahead with DeJean there as a starter.
One of our viewers says Hill looks more comfortable, Hawkeye Howard, than Cade in there. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, almost.
Cade's been banged up.
Yeah.
Like I said, we didn't get 2021 Cade McNamara on this Hawkeye squad at any point, really, except for maybe the first handful of snaps at Kids Day in terms of public viewing. Coming back from a knee and then losing the quad, and like we talked about, not just losing some mobility, but maybe how he's planting and how he's throwing, and that changes everything. Then he does this. And again, that's the shameful thing, is we never at any point saw the Cade McNamara that we saw beat up Iowa in Indy in 2021. But again, I think just eyeball test, however much stock you want to put in that, DeJean Hill, I mean, balls were delivered where they needed to be, aside from the pick, more or less. More often than not, you saw some good accuracy, you saw zip, velocity, a propensity to maybe push it a little farther down when he's not going to the flats. I mean, I can't help but be a little encouraged. I mean, consider it's a small sample size, we don't know a ton, but like, again, the narrative that it's over, it ain't over. We're 5 games in, and you got a dude who looks like a gamer, who's got a lot of time with the ones. I can't understate that.
I just did some quick math on my calculator app. If those 5 drops that he had were caught, he would have threw 59% completion percentage.
And
So
I think I ballparked. You maybe lost 40-some yards off that. I mean, just
and a couple first downs.
It changes everything. Drives stay alive. Again, just from looking at it, DeJean Hill looked good. Can't say enough about, especially going in a tough situation like that.
First meaningful snaps.
And you get down in the second half, and you got to, spark something. Obviously, Cooper's play, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But one thing we talked about on the other offense was that Michigan State, again, we saw they can move the ball, but kind of a propensity to maybe put it in danger. That's really what got them behind the 8 ball against Maryland last Saturday. This Saturday, a little bit more the same. People have been clamoring about, why isn't defense getting the turnovers that they want? Well, they hadn't really played a team that was trying to attack the way this did. Jay Higgins said in post he's so happy he's not going to have to answer any questions like this on Tuesday about these turnovers, but that's what sparked it there. The Cooper DeJean interception off Noah Kim as Sparty was driving in, and that was the first of 3 picks on the day for the Hawkeyes. He also had some great wrap-ups. Xavier Wampa had a really nice game out there. Quinn Schulte, I think, had 8 tackles. Really, really nice turnout for him. This was Sebastian Castro early in the second half with a really nice jump of that. Of course, then the fumble from LeSean Williams, that got returned for a touchdown. Both Owen and I were running down the sideline to get ahead of the Iowa offense, and so we missed it. And then here's Quinn Schulte. Perfect read on this reverse. I think that was an 8-yard loss. Again, big.
He had a good game.
Big night for Quinn. Maybe his best as a Hawkeye.
He had some plays in coverage, too, early on when he was covering that big tight end.
Yeah, and then he might have forced this one. Ethan Herkett gets the recovery. Ethan Herkett
celebrates like he forced the fumble.
Yeah, he was ahead of it for sure.
Yeah.
Xavier boys just enjoying the moment. And then Jamari Harris is a bit of a late push for MSU to try to do anything with time running out. So Cooper and Jamari, that was my preseason prediction. Bold prediction was that Jamari would outpace Cooper in interceptions, but they're tied 1-1 now with that. So great to see that. Of course, the play of the night, if we can roll that raw footage. Cooper DeJean just keeps building that legend. And they had the coop going even before that ball was snapped. And boy, you just felt it. He gets it. He's got so much space there on the left and just takes off and goes. And a lot of people on the sidelines yesterday. A lot of people. So But this was just so fun to see, just the chaos of the celebration. Just everyone just went nuts, and
I think I told you guys that even before that, those third downs where there were a couple of false starts on MSU, I mean, that was like just the loudest I'd heard Kinnick this year, which maybe isn't saying a whole lot, but still was just rocking. And then that place just like made that place erupt. And I don't think I was even alone in that. I saw one guy tweet that this is all just whatever, very loose estimates, but he was like, I've been to over 100 Hawkeye football games, and that Cooper touchdown was the loudest I've ever heard Kinnick Stadium.
It was very loud. I've been to a ton of games, and I think it's hard to judge, but year by year. But the game I remember that was loud or as loud was the Penn State one.
Yeah, I can't fathom.
That kind of reminded me the last touchdown of Regani's because it's the same exact score. Well,
no, he had one against Purdue last year.
No, I meant the same score. Just that touchdown when Regani caught the go ahead. It was 23-16.
Oh,
after that, so and it was the lights were on, and the crowd was going nuts. So. Just kind of reminded me of that moment, although there were a lot more stakes to that one.
Remind you of that too. That crowd. I mean, that crowd played a big role in the second half as Michigan State maybe had a chance to get that moving. Those 2 false starts were huge.
Before we hear from Cooper here in a second, I do want to just again go back to the defense a little bit because boy, I really have been impressed with them, even last week and this week a little bit. Because yesterday, I mean, didn't allow a touchdown yesterday, obviously. And they still got put in some really tough spots. Against the Penn State team last week, they were put in a lot of tough spots where their backs were already against the wall just on the very first play of the drive. Kind of the same thing yesterday where Iowa got themselves pinned deep, had to punt it out of the end zone, and Iowa was starting with their defense already lined up against like their own 40 or 50-yard line. But they bowed up, and they allowed some field goals, which, I mean, again, hitting a 58-yarder, what can you do about that? But those guys played pretty dang good yesterday. I mean, that's the kind of Big Ten defensive play that I think people would want to see out of Iowa this year and that they expect to see out of Parker's defense.
Yeah, one thing I think is still lacking is the sacks. There's still only 3. No sacks last night, and there was a couple pressures, but
they've played some, again, quick-moving offenses that don't give you the opportunity for sacks, and Noah Kim moves really, really well. The same situation of, where are all the interceptions? Well, you haven't really played offenses that are super attacking downfield. Western Michigan obviously goes over the top and catches, but, when you play offenses that don't present opportunities for those stats, and I think Kirk even alluded to it after the game of, like, we tell our guys not to get caught up in that because if that's the stuff you're chasing, you're going to get in bad situations. Whether or not the sacks come, I don't know. I think
Michigan State, though, there's a few times where he was in the pocket for 4 or 5 seconds.
Yeah, he had some time, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
Craig was in the backfield a number of times, I feel like he was really chasing him down, on a handful of
Craig,
plays.
again, I think he might have had an 8-tackle game, but he was all over the place. I'm trying not to get hung up on that. And again, they got some interceptions, so that's all good. But of course, it is the Cooper DeJean show featuring Cooper DeJean, starring Cooper DeJean, produced by Cooper DeJean. What a big night for him, as always.
Saw some things based on, what their formations were and where the punt, we thought was supposed to be. And when I caught it where I was, I knew I had a chance, with all that green in front of me and guys just battling, scrapping, to lay blocks out there. A little frustrating when you get punts that go over your head and they bounce inside the 10 and sit there and we talk about field position. And I feel like that's my job in that scenario to get us good field position. So, yeah, it's a little frustrating, but you just got to stay patient with it. We've been close on a few punt returns all year, and we finally broke one through.
Anytime number 3 gets the ball, I just look for the end zone. He's a special guy, and you don't want to see him in space. So, Coop in space equals good for the Hawkeyes.
Couldn't have said it better myself. 62 tackles now through 5 games, by the way, for Jay Higgins. I can't remember if any of us had. I don't think anybody had him as defensive MVP going into the year. He's as good as it gets. Yep. He's really tremendous.
He's number 1 on that list. If we were doing that right now.
Yeah, for sure.
He's been something special, and talk about a guy who's waited for his opportunity, sitting behind Jack Campbell and company, just waiting to get out there. And boy, he's made the most of it. We would be very out of line if we did not talk about Drew Stevens, folks. Those 26 points, 12 of those come from the foot of number 18. I can't remember off the top of my head the last time Iowa had a guy hit 4 field goals in a game or even attempt 4 field goals in a game, but he certainly was fantastic last night, and can't ask for much more out of a kid who I believe Kirk drew the parallel, and maybe we'll hear it in this soundbite here, not parallel, but just pointed out that a couple of years ago, between him and Aaron Blom, just they had a rough spring, and I think he said as bad as he'd
ever seen.
And I remember him talking about that too, because that was always not something you just assume Iowa's going to have, but they've been blessed with a lot of really, really good kickers over the years, and Drew Stevens certainly etching his name to a spot that if it wasn't for Cooper DeJean's punt return, maybe he's Special Teams Player of the Week in the Big Ten. Heck, maybe they split it, but here's Kirk on Drew Stevens.
Well, he's just been so consistent, basically. I think it was 19 to 21 last year or something like that. I think he missed 2 on the whole season. So if you think about where he was a year ago, spring, when he was here, and both our place kicking just looked terrible that spring, maybe as bad as I've seen in a couple decades. And the improvement he made just from that time spring till last fall, through the fall, it's impressive. And he's a bigger, more mature kid now, and he's done a really nice job.
We're 5 games in, and I still somehow can't wrap my head around the idea that there is an audio version of this stream, too. If you aren't watching on YouTube and you're only listening to the podcast version, get over to the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel whenever you can. That's where we've got video highlights. You're hearing us describe things that you can't see if you're only listening. That's where all the video is, and we'll do a better job. I'll do a better job at plugging that off the top of the shows, because it's getting a little ridiculous that I don't do that. We're just used to TV being the main medium, and I guess that's what I'm overlooking. But great highlights there. Owen shot the heck out of this game. Me, not so much. I had an off.
Don't be so hard on yourself, Mitch.
Dude,
come on now.
I got some shutter questions for you and some other stuff going on. That camera is, I should probably spend more time with the equipment I use. Speaking of spending more time on doing any sort of research, let's look at our picks from this past week, because just a free fall into nothingness is what this continues to be for certainly me and maybe for the rest of the group here collectively.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't bring them up yet. Let me pull it up. This is
all right. We probably don't need to see them. I'd rather.
Yeah, I'll just read them off. Okay, so Owen and Mitch went 1-3-1 with their winner at Purdue and Illinois, and we all pushed the Minnesota-Louisiana game because it was an 11-point win and it was an 11-point favorite. We all lost on Northwestern plus 27, barely, because Penn State won by 28, and then I went 0-4-1. So not a good day for me, going winless, but didn't gain much ground.
So are we back tied again?
We're tied, yes.
Okay.
How am I doing? Am I good?
You're
I'm like
11,
7 games
18, and
under
1.
500.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Don't come to us for your gambling advice. That's
Yeah.
what we're saying
No,
here. Like, we're doing
this
these
is
picks
for,
for fun.
Listen, I'm
entertainment
not putting money
purposes
on
only.
anything I'm picking on here. I know what I don't know, and clearly it's quite a bit. Well, Purdue coming off a big win there against Illinois. They are up next. Certainly, we'll get more into that on Wednesday. 2-3 now. Remember that opening loss to Fresno State that had everybody befuddled? How do you lose at home to Fresno State? That Fresno State squad is now 5-0. They went on the road and won at Arizona State a couple weeks ago and just knocked off Nevada 27-9 yesterday. Hung 53 on Kent State. They have yet to score less than 27 points in a game. They've been really outstanding in terms of just getting that offense going. So Purdue has a good loss, I suppose, to Fresno State, if you want to call it that.
They lost to Syracuse, who I think was 4-0 going into yesterday.
4-1 they lost
Lost to
yesterday.
Clemson, but yeah, Syracuse is obviously good.
Tyrone Tracy, 21 carries, 112 yards, and a touchdown yesterday.
He's the leading rusher, I believe.
That's a big storyline.
Special.
That is a big storyline, yeah. And next week's going to be interesting. Purdue always gives Iowa trouble, especially Iowa's defense. They let you have what am I trying to say? They let you take what they're given, the underneath stuff. And Hudson Card is a good quarterback, and I just can see a lot of long drives if they don't turn the ball over.
I feel like next week is the game where I finally feel like I'm going to be able to maybe have an idea of like what this Iowa team is or who they are. Just because I feel like every game so far has been like, you've played a great Penn State team. You've had that rivalry game against Iowa State. You've maybe played average at best against some competition that's going to be at the bottom of their conferences or against lower level competition. Purdue's a very challenging opponent, but one that plays somewhat at your level. And once you get through that game, it's like, all right, who is this team? What's the identity of this Hawkeye football team?
You're going to learn a lot, especially with Deacon getting a full week with the ones again and prepping for his first career start. It's going to be quite interesting. By the way, Utah State beats UConn in UConn yesterday, 34-33, as we look back at previous opponents.
Not exactly a marquee win beating UConn. I don't know what their record is, but they're usually one of the worst teams.
All you can do is play who's lined up on the other side, folks.
Bottom 10 fodder for Ryan McGee to write about.
There you go. All right, so yeah, we will.
One quick thing before we wrap up, because this is the main storyline. Well, main storyline on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is just a lot of times there were some stretches in the game, and not to harp on this offense, but it's like the main story of Iowa football this year, I feel like, is just there were a couple 3-and-outs in a row, and you guys heard the boos when, it was 3rd and 10, you do a draw.
At least a couple of times, if not 3, of fire Brian chance.
Yeah. So I guess now with the new quarterback coming in, does that play any impact to how he comes out?
People chant the same thing.
Yeah.
Again, it's.
No, I just mean that this offense, I don't know what question I'm asking, but it's there. This is one of the statistically, worst Power 5 offenses in the country. What can they do to?
Iowa could have a 450-yard offensive game, and they'd have a 3-out in the middle of it, and there'd be fire Brian. That's.
I would disagree with it. If there was 450 yards of offense, when's the last time that happened?
This is a terrible parallel to draw. It's a let's go Brandon thing. You know what I mean? It's just the thing you say now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll push back a little bit of that. I think if they came out and had 400 yards of offense in any game, because last night was, I'd say, average, and what do you have, 160 yards passing or so, and then like 60 yards rushing. Not horrible.
I don't think one game would remedy anything, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People, it's the mob thing, mob mentality of like, it started in the student section, and then it's just a thing to do.
Frankly,
that's what it's become.
I guess I see it as somewhat of a moot point at this point because Brian will be the offensive coordinator through the end of the season, and he will not be the offensive coordinator in 5 months. There's no way on God's green earth that Brian Ferentz is going to be the offensive coordinator come next season. And so it's like...
I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that.
I think that that's like a lock in my mind. That there's no way he has this job next year. So you can chisel that in stone by Owen Sebring if you'd like, but there's just no way that based on performance from the last 3 years and the fans' ire, Beth knows it, and she, I think, is going to make a change in the offseason.
You guys want to hear what Kirk said? He was asked last night, you guys were there, about the booing. It's just a short soundbite.
Well, 3-and-outs aren't any fun for anybody, so I get that, and we're working hard to improve that, and that's what we're going to do. That's what we do every year, every season.
About Colby didn't play.
Yeah. Again, we talked about this last week. It was laid out in February. Here's the contract thing, which doesn't terminate him. It just ends that deal, and whatever happens with that happens. And then it's put in again in August. He's not getting fired today, tomorrow, at any point until this thing is all the way. And I think that even that contract would then void until at the end of June. Again, it's just chanting is just becoming a thing to do to fill time because you have no control over the situation and you want to do something to express disappointment. That's all it is.
I told Mike yesterday I wanted to bring this up, and this is not my thought. Nick Weig is the one who pointed it out to me, our colleague, and maybe somebody else had said it, but based on the production that Nate Stanley had under Brian Ferentz as offensive coordinator, did he deserve a Heisman Trophy? The fact that guy put up the numbers that he did in the offense compared to what quarterbacks have done in that offense since then, boy, those numbers that Nate Stanley put up look even more impressive in hindsight.
Nate Stanley had 2 NFL tight ends, multiple NFL wide receivers. That's what I...
O-line was a lot better, too. That's why...
an experienced O-line. Yeah.
Now, I would be more on the, as a fan, a negative side, and I think there's games where Brian there's hardly any good play calls. But when you look back, and Lysico had that stat where the year 2017 or 2018, 70% of the balls went to wide receivers. Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith. Brandon Smith had a cup of coffee. Amir Smith-Marset just had a touchdown a couple weeks ago in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. But the talent was a lot better on offense. So you hear some apologists, they want to be, framed, that it goes back to execution. The offensive line is not playing up to that standard.
Yeah.
They played for Nate Stanley, but Nate Stanley was also on NFL roster for a while too, so he was a talented guy.
Certainly the offensive line, that is definitely a fair point in that one. It's hard. I always feel like a position like wide receiver is so hard to judge talent-wise because it's like, could Nico Ragaini or Deontay Vines or Seth Anderson put up Amir Smith-Marset type of numbers if they had a different quarterback thrown to them or if they were in a little bit different system? I mean, it's hard because they look great because, the offensive line helped and the quarterback helped them look a little bit better. The talent level there, I guess I don't know. It's hard for me to say as somebody who doesn't know X's and O's of football that well if they have like a very wide gap in talent between those type of players.
And Charlie Jones goes to Purdue, and it's a different offense. It's an offense that's going to fire it downfield over and over. Aiden O'Connell starting for the Raiders today. I think she's got to be the first Purdue guy to start a game in the NFL since Breeze, right?
I have to think so.
Yeah.
Did Brian Hoyer start any time between those two? Or wait, not Brian Hoyer.
Hoyer went to
He's
Michigan
a
State,
Michigan State guy. Who am I thinking of? But regardless, yeah.
Kyle Orton probably.
It's been a while. Keaton Copeland's on the record too. He was asked about this, I think, last season of like, receivers aren't coming to Iowa, or we tell them like, this isn't a place to come pad your stats.
Yeah.
That's just, it's different when it's Amir and he's a fast dude who can, break off big chunk plays and things like that. And Brandon was a great deep threat as well. Like,
I think Seth's a good receiver. I don't know if he's on. I remember when Charlie had the 21, his last year at Iowa, he had 21 catches.
Yeah.
And me and my buddy would go to games and be like, why don't we play him more? Keegan Johnson was the receiver there with Arlen Bruce, I believe, was the two receivers out there. But it's just like, you could see the talent because he was returning punts too. I'm like, man, he's electric. I think Seth is really good with the ball, and I think he's electric too. But I don't know if he's right on that level.
Yeah.
But he's talented.
And you hate to keep playing the wait and see game, but it's possible. I mean, still, Deontay and Seth are still young.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had a lot of on-field time yet. So
Deontay's a
maybe
senior,
that'll.
isn't he? Or is he a junior?
Yeah, he's up there, but to your point,
He hasn't played a lot of games.
Experience-wise.
Yeah.
Keegan Johnson, I don't think has played a ton for Kansas State. Not people's situations are what they are, but like,
Yeah.
that's the other thing too. Is just there's not. I hate saying it like this. There's not a guy we're going to see on Sundays right now that's been heavily involved in the wide receiver offense.
Mm-hmm.
In my humble
No, I'd agree.
apologies to everybody who's involved. I don't know.
It's just one of those
can
topics
talk
that I
in
wanted
circles
to
about this for
bring it up, and we'll probably talk about it every reaction podcast. But it's been the story for 3 years now, so I think it was worth talking about a little bit at least.
Sure.
Yeah. Time is a flat circle. We'll just keep talking about it. We'll check back in on Wednesday after we've talked to everybody Tuesday. We'll have more on Cade's situation, probably an update on Nick DeJean as well, and we'll continue to wildly speculate about things completely out of our control, but that we can't get off our minds because that's life over there. So for Eye on the Hawks, thanks everybody for watching. Again, the YouTube channel is where you got all the videos and everything, and you've got the podcast links as well to listen throughout the week. So for Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. I'll get better at endings and better at introducing videos by November at least, right? I mean, come on. Have a good night, everybody.